Here's the plan. I'm gonna go take an Uber. I'll go into the school campus.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Walk up the stairs, get my AR, and shoot people. And people will die.
Valentine's Day is a highly anticipated celebration of love and affection. For high schoolers, it's a time to spotlight their feelings and confess their romance. However, this surge of warmth and care reversely strengthened the feeling of disconnect that an autistic boy had always felt. Rage, jealousy, and hatred led him to openly fire a semi-automatic rifle in the vicinity of the Stoneman Douglas High School, slaying numerous students and faculty members. This massacre would go on to become the deadliest school shooting in American history. Today, on Crime Diaries, we head to Florida to explore the case of Nikolas Cruz.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018.
This boy, who was gloating about a massacre, is Nikolas Jacob Cruz, born on September 24, 1998, in Margate, Florida, to Brenda Woodward. Brenda had a history of alcohol and drug abuse and a string of arrests dating back to the 80s. She was reportedly homeless and a prostitute when she became pregnant with Nikolas, who would then be replaced at birth by Linda and Roger Cruz, along with his brother Zachary. By the time he was 3, Nikolas was diagnosed with developmental delays, and by 6, he suffered the trauma of witnessing his father's death by heart attack. His father's death would leave his mother, Linda, to raise the two boys as a single mother. Growing up, Nikolas had been a difficult child. He was diagnosed with multiple disorders and conditions such as depression, ADHD, emotional behavioral disability, and autism. He had counselors at school and at home and started taking medications. Linda doted on Nikolas, but despite her attempts to get him help and making sure he was well taken care of, Nikolas would never seem to fit in with his normal peers. He had trouble making friends, and he had quirks that made him an easy target for bullying. He was smaller than the other kids and certainly, to his peers, much more peculiar. He was particular about food. For instance, he had always required to eat precisely 8 chicken nuggets, a distinction that could be attributed to OCD. The problems only continued as Nikolas got older. Over the span of 10 years, law enforcement received at least 45 calls from the Cruz home for service. Nikolas would get physical with his mother and brother. At 14 years, Linda reported that Nikolas hit her with the plastic hose of a vacuum cleaner. Several months later, Nikolas had thrown her against the wall because she took away his Xbox. And a year after that, Nikolas had punched the wall for the same reason. It seemed like professionals urged Linda to be stricter and more consistent in her parenting and in getting Nikolas treatment. However, she would rarely follow through. She was a 57-year-old woman, still depressed over the sudden loss of her husband, all while dealing with 2 very tumultuous children. Nikolas was just as much of a problem child at school as he was at home. At school, his teachers and classmates knew him as a nuisance. He would consistently use foul language and was known for his random, angry outbursts. Even more alarming than his disobedience in school was Nikolas's fascination with guns and his troubling online activity. His internet searches were filled with extremely racist rhetoric and ideology. He would draw swastikas on school assignments and on his backpack for everyone to see. Online, he would make comments about killing people and becoming a school shooter. In addition to reports made to law enforcement, tipsters notified the FBI several times with concerns that Nikolas could potentially carry out a school shooting. Unfortunately, 2 months after Nikolas's mother passed away, those concerns would become a horrifying reality. On February 14, 2018, Nikolas arrived at Parkland, Florida's Majority Stoneman Douglas High School with a backpack filled with magazines and a black duffel bag packed with a legally purchased AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. He had been expelled from the school in 2017, and the school staff had been warned that he was a risk to student safety. But when a staff member saw him outside, he hesitated to call a code red, an emergency response that alerts the school. Nikolas made his way into the high school's freshman building and unpacked his rifle in the stairwell before firing down the corridor of the first-floor hallway.
I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired. 1,200 building. I hear shots fired by the football field. Shots fired by the football field.
Shots fired by the football field. Heard.
We're looking at the 1,200 building. It's going to be the 300 building. It's going to be right off of Holmberg Road by the senior lot.
The smell of sulfur from the gun lingered in the air as bullets shattered windows and shot through doors. In just under 2 minutes, he would murder 11 people and injure 13. On the third floor, Nikolas would end up killing his last 6 victims and injuring 4 more. Some students ran for their lives, while others hid in classrooms, closets, and bathrooms.
911, what is your emergency?
Hi, my daughter just texted me from school. She's at Stoneman Douglas, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, and she says there's an active shooter.
Nikolas's attack lasted less than 4 minutes and left a total of 17 dead. Among the dead were 3 teachers and 14 students. The majority of the victims were 14-year-olds. Additionally, 17 students would be injured during the massacre. It would become the deadliest high school shooting in American history, surpassing the Columbine High School massacre that killed 15, including the perpetrators in Colorado in April 1999. 7 minutes into his rampage, Nikolas dropped his rifle in a different stairwell and left the school in an attempt to blend in with the crowd of escaping students. He was able to successfully leave campus and was at large for over an hour. During this time, he stopped by a Subway and McDonald's where he sat down and casually spoke to one of the victim's brothers. CCTV footage later released shows Nikolas seemingly calm and unfazed after the shooting. After being spotted by a Broward County police officer 2 miles from the crime site, Nikolas was quickly apprehended and identified as the shooter. The massacre left the Florida community devastated and sent shockwaves throughout the rest of the country. It sparked outrage among students and was a catalyst for many anti-gun violence organizations, pushing the discussion of gun safety legislation into the spotlight, urging politicians to speak out. 3 weeks later, Florida Governor Rick Scott, a supporter of the NRA, signed a bill imposing a 21-year-old legal age requirement for gun purchases and a 3-day waiting period on all gun transactions. While it was the first time in 30 years that Florida had passed any gun control measures, many felt that the legislation didn't go far enough. Nikolas Cruz was charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder, which carried a possible death penalty conviction. The trial was supposed to begin in January 2020, but was delayed to summer of 2020 to give the defense more time to prepare. In June 2020, the trial was delayed a second time due to COVID-19 concerns. During the trial, Nikolas's defense attorneys pointed to his birth mother's alcohol abuse during her pregnancy and how this instance put him on a lifelong path of erratic and violent behavior. Prosecutors worked hard to show that Nikolas's violent rampage was not due to any fetal alcohol spectrum disorder like the defense suggested, but rather it was driven by his antisocial personality disorder or sociopathy. On October 20th, 2021, Nikolas pled guilty to the 17 counts of first-degree murder. The jury returned with a verdict of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
The sentence of the court as follows. Count 17 for the murder in the first degree of Peter Wang. The court imposes a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole.
When deciding on the death penalty, 9 jurors were for it, while 3 were against it, taking the death penalty off the table.
I'm sorry, when you murder 17 people in cold blood, the only appropriate punishment is capital punishment.
This pushed petitions or revising the death penalty law to be in effect when voted by the majority instead of requiring unanimity. The murdered victims' families expressed their anger and disappointment over the verdict. Many families were in court every day, sharing in their victim impact statements that Nikolas deserved the death penalty. On November 2nd, 2022, several years after the shooting took place, Nikolas was officially sentenced to 34 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. More than half of school shooters have a history of psychological problems, and Nikolas Cruz was no exception. He had an array of disorders and psychological issues that plagued him his entire life. While his past may help paint a larger picture of why this tragedy occurred, it could never justify or make sense of it. The harsh truth is that there were many red flags that were ignored, and this school shooting, like so many others, could have been prevented. Gun control, school security, response time, and school counseling were given stricter attention. It's evident by the footage after the fact that Nikolas Cruz had no remorse for the lives he took, or empathy for the countless people that would be directly affected by his actions. The victims' families are still trying to put the pieces of their lives back together again. And the students there on that horrible day in the Valentine's Day of 2018 will have to carry the physical and psychological scars from the horrors they've experienced for the rest of their lives. At the very least, they can now rest a little easier, knowing that the person responsible will never see the light of day again behind bars. Tell us in the comment section. Also, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to get the latest updates. This has been Crime Diaries, and until next time, don't be another statistic.